TV.
And welcome back to KickBack. I'm Dave Carroll here with Rachel Senko. Good to have you here, Rachel.
Rachel Senko Strasser. I'm a married woman now, Dave.
Oh my gosh. Ben is around. So we'll be hearing more from Ben coming up.
Yes.
But we're going to get into it with Tim Philp. That could be the name of a show, right? Get into it with Tim Philp.
Get into it.
Get into it with Tim Philp. Tim is the director of Rosewood House, and we were chatting, Tim, just out in the green room before we were starting, and someone out there was asking, so what is Rosewood House? And you're like, we would be in trouble without Rosewood House in our community. It's the largest homeless shelter in our community. Talk a little bit about what Rosewood House, in case people don't know really what it entails.
Well, Rosewood House is a shelter for homeless people. It's the only co-ed shelter in town, which means we deal with both men and women. And it started off, I think I've been around Rosewood around 20 some odd years, 22 years I was told yesterday, which somewhat, I don't think I've worked any place in my life for 22 years, but it started off as a group home for people with mental health and addictions. And that existed in that format for probably 7, 8, maybe as much as 10 years. And then some time ago, the city asked us to transform ourselves into a homeless shelter because we were starting to see a greater proportion of people that were homeless in the community. And, you know, times change and you know, the economies change and people become homeless for various reasons. I mean, we've always had homeless with us in not only our city, but in any city. And the difficulty is that we started to see a sharp uptick in the number of people that were homeless. You know, we start to see things like encampments, and a lot of that had to do with changes in the law. Back in the good old days, you know, the era of madmen, we had vagrancy laws. You could be put in jail if you didn't have enough money to support yourself. I feel a little bit like Ebenezer Scrooge, you know. Are there no prisons? Are there no? We're looking at the old laws like vagrancy laws and things like that are gone. And while it's certainly not correct that people should be jailed because they're poor, it did create a situation where homeless people became, in the public perception, a nuisance. And so there were encampments. They would hang out at, you know, inside the atriums of banks, so that where the ATMs are, because they were warm. And the number of people increased dramatically. And as they increased dramatically, the city found themselves short of places to host these people, or to either help them get into shelter, or to help them deal with some of the problems that were keeping them out of shelter. So they asked us to do that. And then along came, you know, the last 2 years. I always say that, you know, when you start looking at when we start talking about 2022, I won't really know what a lot of people, because a lot of them stayed home and they worked from home, and of course it was a very busy time for us because we had to keep going. We had the number of people that were homeless increased a great deal. Plus we had to run out of the cold programs because we've had some very severe winters, and so we've been involved in this sector of homelessness for probably the last 10 years anyway.
It must be like trying to drink from a fire hose sometime, because I mean, even without hearing the numbers of homelessness, and if you look at the numbers, and I know even that's a difficult thing to really quantify, but just observationally, if you were a community member, you would likely go, oh, this is a bit of a new situation than we've ever had in Brantford before, and homelessness is more visible than it's ever been. How do you deal with the, boy, there's more problem than beds, there's more issue than ability to be able to wrap our hands around this?
Well, the problem is actually worse than you've outlined, because there are what are called the hidden homeless. And they're not just people that, they may have a place to stay, but it's a very insecure place. They're couch surfing on a friend. And all it's going to take is an argument over who ate the last bag of chips to make them homeless. So there's a large group of hidden homeless that are out there. But I think it's important to look at what are homeless people. And everybody has an idea in their head about what a homeless person is. And unfortunately, there's no such thing as a homeless person. Everybody has their own unique story, and everybody is homeless for a reason. And when most people think about homeless people, they either think of bums, or they think of people just like you and I, who through some unfortunate circumstance became homeless. They got a divorce, they lost a job, they got kicked out of their housing because a landlord decided to renovate it or something. So there are lots of reasons why people look at that as being homeless, and they think, but for the grace of, go I. And that's what most people think about homeless. And that's probably, in my experience, that's probably about 20% of them. The other 80% are homeless for completely different reasons. And they're homeless because they have mental health issues, or they have addiction issues, or worse, they have both of them. Now, back in the 60s, early 70s, pharmacology companies came up with some wonderful drugs. And they controlled a lot of the symptoms of schizophrenia and other mental health conditions. And the government said, well, you know, we're keeping these very expensive facilities to treat these people. We can let them all out, give them a prescription, job done. And the idea was that they would provide the supports in the community for these people. Unfortunately, they opened up the doors of the mental institutions. They let the people out in the streets. They gave them a prescription, a handshake, and said, see ya. But they never created the infrastructure beyond that to support them. And, you know, when you have mental health issues, and, you know, it's hard, mental health issues usually are hardest on the family members and the loved ones. And those people suffer tremendously, and they finally get to the point where I can't deal with you anymore. Go away. It's enough. I have to look after my own mental health. And then, unfortunately, these people are out without any resource. They're unhappy. Oh, drugs will help, make you high, make you forget things. And I suppose it does for a while when you're high. But when you come down from being high, all your problems are still there, and you might wake up in jail, or you might wake up in the hospital, or you might find that if people hadn't found you, you'd be dead. And there's a lot of that. I mean, we've had some deaths at Rosewood House, and I can tell you there are probably 3, 4, maybe 5 deaths a month here in Brantford that don't get reported. People just die anonymously.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lots to be able to dig into here.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be back with Tim for another segment and look at some of the mental health components of the things that we're dealing with, both in the community, but also for those serving people in this place. So we'll be right back on KickBack right after this.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hey folks, it's me, Giovanni Patini, the host of the RTV quiz show, the hottest show on television. It's the hilarious quiz show where you, the viewers, play for valuable non-existent prizes. It's got great trivia, fun facts, and a lot of laughs, all blended together in a perfect cocktail of edutainment. So join us Wednesdays at 7:30 right here on Rogers TV. Nice.
Get a little messy while having a whole lot of fun. Mindful Makers explores the world around you and inspires you to think outside the box. Join Agnes and her friends as they share crafty projects and talk to local artists. Mindful Makers, Mondays at 6 p.m. on Rogers TV.
My name is Chase Nicholas. I am a Mi'kmaq hockey player. Growing up, I always remember my family talking about the Mi'kmaq as the creators of the game of hockey. In grade 7, I did research on Mi'kmaq hockey sticks as the first sticks of the NHL. I found a Mi'kmaq hockey stick made in 1917, the same year the NHL was formed. I was surprised to find out the very stick I was holding was made by my great-great-grandfather, Alexander Cope. In 1934, an elder known as Old Joe Cope wrote a letter to the Halifax Herald claiming the Mi'kmaq created hockey. I found out later that I am a direct descendant of Old Joe Cope. There was a time when Mi'kmaq children were torn from their families and not allowed to speak their language, losing their words and stories. But the stories are coming back to us. Stepping on the ice, I take pride knowing the roots of the game of hockey stem from my ancestors in the Mi'kmaq Nation.
Personal finance show that dares to ask those money questions you've always wanted to. Join Mike Bregueth when he talks with experts on all aspects of money. Money Matters with Mike Bregueth, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on Rogers TV.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, my life changed forever. During the pandemic, all of our lives changed, and many of us turned to alcohol and drugs to cope. As life returns to normal, the increase in substance use from COVID has lingered, and some police services report an increase in impaired driving that caused heartbreak and devastation. Now, more than ever, we need your commitment to never drive impaired and to encourage all of your family and friends to do the same. Together, we can save lives.
We've been chatting, and I'm almost like on the edge of my seat listening to you chat about the Rosewood House and the individuals, because that's who they are. They are individuals, like you said, who have a story, who have a history, who have their struggles. I love how you touched on the fact that everyone has a story, and there is a stigma about homelessness, and now it's just a bum on the street. And I want to raise my son Theo to think about and look at people. What is their story? How did they get to this place in their lives? So people who come through the Rosewood House and get to meet you and your staff, and what services can they access? And is there hope for them today to come through and recoup and find permanent housing and so on and so on?
As the old saying goes, hope springs eternal. Mm-hmm. The answer is it depends. Mm-hmm. And it depends on why they're homeless. As I said, there are many reasons why. There are as many reasons why people are homeless as there are people who are homeless. And for some people, well, first of all, let's talk about the services that we offer. We're a shelter. Yep. We get people in out of the cold, out of the rain, off the streets. Mm-hmm. We feed them. We provide them with a clean and a warm place to sleep. Mm. And then we sit down with them and we try to analyze, why are you here? What is it that made you homeless? Right. And once we have some understanding of that, somebody who let's say is like yourself and you became homeless for something, if you came to us, we probably wouldn't refer you to drug counseling because drugs are not why you're homeless. Mm-hmm. We would put you in touch with the various city agencies and other things that could help you either. Is the problem economic? Is the problem lack of housing? And of course, Brantford we've had sort of a perfect storm here in Brantford. We tore down one of the largest group of pre-Confederation buildings in Canada a few years ago, and there were reasons that council decided to do that, and I'm not going to get into that debate, but those buildings provided a lot of housing for people. And at the same time that happened, the city was encouraging Laurier University to come here to Brantford, and that's been a tremendous success. We started off with, something like just a handful of students, and now we're into the thousands. Yeah. And unfortunately for the homeless people, that made an opportunity for landlords who, if you own some two-bit flea bag room, you put a bit of lipstick and makeup on the room, and then you can suddenly turn it into student housing. Right. And the people who were living there on the margins got kicked out. And Brantford hasn't invested in affordable housing in a long time. Now, to be fair, that's changed a lot in the last few years. But you can't snap your fingers and make affordable housing. It takes years. It took us 35 years to get into this situation, and it's going to take almost as long to get out of this situation. And the city has recognized that, and they're putting a lot of money into affordable housing. But the response and the services that we offer to residents always depends on what their needs are. Because, like I said, there's no point in sending somebody who's there for economic reasons into drug counseling or mental health counseling. You've got to tailor what you do to the individual that comes in.
Right.
And the problem with that, everybody wants to fix homelessness. Either they have a real social conscience and they really care about the fact there are human beings that are sleeping on our streets. We're a rich city. Nobody should ever sleep on the streets. But having said that, the other side of the coin is that there are people that just need a place to stay for a while, and then they can go off and live on their own. The difficulty is that everybody wants the problem fixed. The problem is that to fix the problem is expensive. Counseling is expensive. Drug programs are expensive. Addiction programs for alcohol, etc. They're all expensive, and not only are they expensive, but they are all basically fully subscribed. If you came to me and said you want drug counseling, we would give you some drug counseling at Rosewood, but to get into a program, you might be looking at a year. And of course, some of the problem with some of these programs is that you want drug counseling. Okay, well, when you come to drug counseling, we're going to test you, and you better test clean. Well, if you could get off drugs, what the hell do you need the program for?
Right.
Like it's like a novel, Catch-22.
Right.
And so there are not enough services here. The services are expensive, yet taxpayers have to pay for this, and they want the problem solved. But the tolerance that taxpayers have to spend the money to actually solve the problem is limited. And it doesn't help that, and I guess maybe I'm telling some tales out of school here, but it doesn't help that about every 5 years there is a new theory of homelessness that comes along. I think the one we're currently using is called Housing First, which is, and all of these models have good things to say about them. And the philosophy behind Housing First is that doesn't matter what problems you have, they're not made better by being homeless, which I absolutely agree with. Unfortunately, there's a reason why people are homeless, and you can't just put them into a home because their drug addiction, suddenly they turn it into a drug house or a party house, or they just don't pay the rent because they haven't got the cognitive ability to remember to do that. And without those supports, and those supports are expensive, and that's the catch-22. You want to fix homelessness, you want to fix mental health, it's going to cost money. And if you don't want to pay the money, two things are going to happen. One, human beings are going to suffer. And two, you're not going to be able to walk down the street and see a bunch of people standing on the corner begging for change. When the people that you walk across the street when you walk downtown to avoid, when I walk downtown, it's, oh, hi, Tim, how you doing? I know all of these people, and I know a lot of the stories behind them, and I can tell you that some of the stories are intensely tragic.
So when we speak about change, and I don't even like the word fixing homelessness because it's homeless people in a way aren't a problem. Like you said, they're individuals who are on a journey, they have a story, and they deserve time and attention and a lot of empathy. Change happens, I feel, at the community level, like real change. Like, yes, there's the government and there's the taxes and there's the way that funds are allocated, but what can we as a community do to support the Rosewood House?
in
that's
2
easy.
minutes, Tim.
Go.
How do we
Send money.
Donations.
Donations are helpful, but I mean, we generally get a lot of donations. I mean, Brantford is a very generous community, and I say that with a lot of humility. I am very impressed with the number of donations and things that we get at Rosewood. But to fix the problem, which is the phrase that you don't like, I don't really care what the phrase is. My issue is I want to close Rosewood down, and the way to close Rosewood down is to make sure there are no homeless people. And we're going to be dealing with, I'll be dead long before this problem is solved in our community, simply because it's such a big problem. And the issue is, if you really want to solve this problem, you need to talk to politicians. You need to let them know that they need to help with this problem, and they need to support the people in the community, like Rosewood, like the faith communities, like Salvation Army, and all of the other organizations that are trying hard to provide services for these people, actually are able to do so, and they have the funds to do it.
Well, listen, we could talk about this forever, and I'm sure that we will again. But so thanks so much for coming, talking about Rosewood today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for the work that you and your team do. It's vital and important, and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk soon. We'll be back right after this.
Weekly in-depth coverage of the most local stories in Stratford, Perth, Brantford, Brant, Guelph, Wellington, and the Waterloo region. Hyperlocal stories that matter to you and your community. All this and more on your Region This Week. All local, all year round. New episodes every Friday at 7 p.m. right here on Rogers TV.
Our world is changing.
Now more than ever, we have seen firsthand the brutality of systematic racism.
Here in Canada, we can do better.
It is time to connect, commit, and change.
I'm Queen.
And I'm Aaliyah Ali, and we're inviting you to join us on Diverse and Converse.
We'll connect you with leaders from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities.
Now is the time for change.
Coming soon to Rogers TV. Join Carolina Suarez for Tapestry Hall Style.
Can't wait to show you the latest in entertainment.
Coming soon to Rogers TV.
Life can be stressful. I know that. We're here to help you. Simple, easy recipes, amazing guests. At Home with Chef D, Wednesdays, 6 p.m. on Rogers TV.
I was born and raised in Musqueam First Nation territory by my mother, who spoke Hunkaminam to me. As a child, I ceased using my mother tongue, as to use any language other than English was considered not being Canadian, so I was told. The old people came to me in a dream and reminded me of who I am and where I come from. I have reawakened. My roots are strong, and I'm no longer a silent speaker. My language tells me where I'm from. It defines me and guides me to teach others to learn and understand our culture and traditions. A gift for those in the present and the unborn generations. What was lost is found. What was asleep has awakened. My blood is here, and I am complete. I have returned home.
I did it. I need it.
The hero gave it.
And I am alive.
As an organ donor, you can save up to 8 lives and enhance the lives of 75 others. Please go to our website. Pledge a gift of life. You'll be glad you did.
And welcome back to KickBack. Next in the studio, we have Tina Wolak. And it's lovely to have you here in our fake living room.
Yeah.
And,
Nice to be here.
And you have a very interesting personal story. I mean, part of the reason why KickBack exists is to be able to have a space for people to be able to tell their stories, because everyone's story is different and we don't know what each other is going through. Right. And you reached out to us, and you have a very, very important personal story that had to do with your son.
Yes, I do.
Tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay, back in June of this past year, 2022, my son, who was exhibiting issues, mental health issues. We weren't quite sure what was going on. Yeah. We do know that he'd been to see his family doctor, and we decided to get him into counseling through help with his sister Kaylee, helped us to find a counselor. We went to see the counselor. Brad himself went through a video chat with a counselor, and he seemed to be okay, but he was still exhibiting. We couldn't go in his apartment, and he was just not the loving son that he had been. Second counseling session, I received an email from his counselor, and she said, "You need to get Brad to sign these documents immediately. We need to talk." Right away, Mom's heart goes, okay. And I sat down with Brad and I said, Patricia would like you to fill these out so that she can speak with your doctor and she can speak with me. So the very next appointment, it was disclosed to me that he was suffering with paranoid schizophrenia and had been for quite some time. So at that point, Mama Bear kicks in. It's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
And your spidey senses has kind of kicked in prior to that night when he called you, needed to talk to you, wasn't feeling well. You did telehealth. He ended up going to Emerge and then was discharged because he didn't actually divulge to them or share with them what he was experiencing, which was voices.
Exactly. So from that point, so it had been 6 months that this had gone on. So right away, I call the doctor's office and I say, he needs to see a psychiatrist. We have to get him in. He needs to be properly diagnosed. And I was told, he was referred on April 5th. An urgent referral was sent April 5th.
Wow.
Get on the phone with the doctor's office and I said, what's going on? Oh, his OHIP number wasn't correct, so we sent it back. Didn't pick up the phone. It was an urgent referral. Could pick up the phone, call the doctor's office and say, what's up with his OHIP number? And my doctor's office is saying, no, there's nothing wrong with it. But 2 months had gone by. 2 months where he could have been getting help. So I, at one point, let's go to Toronto, we'll find someplace, I'll go to London, I'll go anywhere to get help. Just a thought. I have a friend that works for a psychiatrist. We see a couple of years, car show friend texted her, this is what's happened. And she said, you get a referral, because everything has to go through the family doctor. And Brad had been to his family doctor. And get a referral, we'll get him in. 2 days later, we're seeing a psychiatrist. His medication had been changed. Wow. And we started to see an improvement. So that's one thing. It is, falling through the cracks. When we called back to the doctor's office, so they sent it back and then shredded it. So there was really no follow-up on their part to say, maybe we better check back and find out what's going on with his OHIP number, because it was urgent. So that really was disheartening.
So there's that barrier one where your son was in Emerge, but didn't feel safe to share because of the stigma. And then there's the gap of him falling through the cracks. And then the paperwork. And
the paperwork.
You are meticulous, Tina. You are one of the most organized, meticulous people I know. So.
Well, you came here today with a bag full of stuff, and so when you were telling us about it, you're like, "This is the," and I'm like, she did not leave home without the paperwork. So I mean, clearly that's a big part of this. When people are dealing with really drastic mental health situations, paperwork is probably not the easiest thing to be able to get done.
Thank you. And for somebody, I'm a smart chick. I can say that. And I was struggling with the mountain of paperwork to get from OW to ODSP. And then when you're on ODSP, you have to apply for CPP disability, even though they told me he's not going to get it. But you still have to apply for that. And in order to apply for that, you have to have a CRA login, and you can't get your login right away because you have to wait 5 days to get, in the mail and then go back and log on. Can you imagine that if you did not have an advocate to be able to do this for you, that is why so many people are slipping through the cracks. It is so difficult to maneuver our system. If I wanted to talk to any one of Brad's workers, I had to have him with me in the car, and because he was afraid to answer the phone and afraid to answer the door and wouldn't get his mail. So it was always Mom. He'd call me in the middle of the day. I'd leave work. Best boss ever to be able to allow me, Millennium Security Services, Michael Harrington, allowing me to leave my office when I needed to help my son when he was in crisis.
And it sounds like you had your connection to a friend who worked for a psychiatrist, and your daughter Kaylee had connection to somebody in London who worked for social services there and was able to kind of say, do this and then submit this document and do this. And I was asking you, as an advocate for your son who was able to organize and get doctors to sign, and to eventually he did get qualified for CPP.
Disability. Yeah.
Disability. There is no one place where you can go to find help to articulate the process, step 1, step 2, step 3. So it's very scattered, and I think it's so valuable to have these conversations because this is a gap, and you've illuminated it, and now you're talking about it.
And if it wasn't, Kaylee has a friend who works for social services in London, and she was sending us, this is what you need. Did you know that Brantford has an early psychosis intervention program?
Which is what your son was eventually diagnosed with.
No idea. My doctor didn't know. The psychologist didn't know.
In Brantford.
In Brantford.
Are doctors, psychiatrists in Brantford, and they did not know about this program.
The document was sent to us from London, to my daughter, to me. We take it to the doctor's office, get it filled out. He's on the waiting list. It's an amazing program. When you're in the early psychosis intervention program, you can get them to do your injections. They will take you out and reacclimate you to society. They will counsel you all in one place. If you don't know it's there, then how many?
Yeah, so just about a minute left, Tina.
Okay.
How do people find to get to this program? Like, if people are watching going, oh my goodness, that would be super helpful. How do people go and find it?
You can Google it, or you can call the Brantford Hospital and ask for the early psychosis program, and they'll put you through. So
and this has made a big difference in his life.
It has. It has. In mine, there's family counseling.
Yours, yeah.
So I was going there before because he was on a waiting list. He just got accepted. It was 6 months, and he just got accepted, and now we're moving down that road. So that is huge. But the whole process from December of last year to now has been hurdle after falling through the cracks and paperwork and not getting answers back. And it's if you could. And the last thing, I know it's a minute, have a document for an advocate. If you can advocate for your loved one, have a form that the government can say, yes, you can speak on behalf, because they don't have their voice. They're afraid to share their voice, but they trust you. So if you could have a document, have it signed, then you can talk to OW, you can talk to ODSP, and you can talk to anybody to try to help your loved one.
Awesome. Tina, thanks so much for sharing your story. Very, very important stuff. And it sounds like you're on a better track now, so that's really encouraging. We'll be right back with more great people, more great stories on KickBack right after this.
Hey folks, it's me, Giovanni Patini, the host of the RTV quiz show, the hottest show on television. It's the hilarious quiz show where you, the viewers, play for valuable non-existent prizes. It's got great trivia, fun facts, and a lot of laughs, all blended together in a perfect cocktail of edutainment. So join us Wednesdays at 7:30 right here on Rogers TV. Nice.
Welcome to Tapestry Hall Style. I'm Carolina Suarez, and I can't wait to show you the latest in entertaining, food, and fashion. Catch us in Tapestry Hall Style, coming soon on Rogers TV.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
I'm Gagwag. My name means everything.
Tom Longboats.
I am Wolf Clan. Onondaga Nation, I've run many different races. I've run to survive and to be free. I've run to win for honor.
His people might be lazy, but this one's damn fast.
My people respected our runners, people who carried important messages from village to village.
I need a guide to the next post. Dispatch carrier, sir. I can get you there.
God's sakes, man, slow down. Who do you think I am, Tom Longboat?
No, sir. I am.
Running makes me feel alive. It's everything.
Tom Longboat was the first Indigenous person to win the Boston Marathon. He ran his way to international fame and became an inspiration to generations of athletes.
On the Art Trail with Joanne returns for season 2. We have a terrific lineup coming up for you. We will be interviewing folks like gallery owners, musicians, a theater impresario, a master Japanese calligrapher, and much more. So watch On the Art Trail with Joanne, Saturdays at 7.
Yo. Yep. Okay, I'll be there.
And welcome back to KickBack. Oh, we have a great guest.
We sure do.
My favorite people in the world. Becca MacLellan's here.
Hi, Becca.
Becca, you've been on a number of my different Rogers deals over the years in all kinds of different roles. We've done quite a lot of work together in our city life and with the different organizations. And you are now the executive director of Kids Can Fly, which is really, really exciting, both for Kids Can Fly and for you. Let's kind of start a little bit higher level in case people don't know what Kids Can Fly is. And then we'll get into some of the different mental health components of parenting and learning and the stresses that come with all this. Yeah. Talk about Kids Can Fly.
Sure. So Kids Can Fly is a registered charity in Brantford, and we work with young children and their parents. And our goal is basically to really invest in those early years so that the later years turn out better.
Right? Because there's that window of opportunity and early development.
Yeah, and a lot of the work that we do is really based on brain development and how critical those first few years are in the wiring of a baby's brain and the opportunities for learning and growth and how much they affect the child later in life.
Now, I remember when we had our first. Jared is now almost 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
And we weren't kid people. Like nobody, we didn't babysit. We didn't. He was like the first baby I'd ever held, and so we did not know what we were doing. And when we had all these baby showers, we started to get things like Baby Einstein and all these different things that smart people were like, no, this isn't really important. I'm like, really, this is just bad TV is what this is. But the quicker you can get to helping develop kids' brains, it really makes such a difference, doesn't it?
It does. And so that's part of the reason we run, we're a chapter of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which is a massive program. We send out over 3,000 books a month to local children.
I have lots of friends who subscribe and they rave about it.
It's a really great program.
Anything Dolly Parton touches really is
magic.
Turn to gold.
Yeah, so that one's pretty magical. So that involves each child receiving a book every month. And the whole goal isn't just literacy. It's about that connection between parents and kids as they read to each other, in that language development for kids. So it all comes back to brain development.
Yeah, story time with Theo at bedtime each night it's got to be one of my most favorite times of the day.
And it's important to be able to facilitate that and a lot of the other skills that parents need too. So one of our programs is called the Launch Pad, and that's a drop-in program for caregivers and toddlers.
Cool.
And in that program, parents are actually taught how to engage with their kids with hands-on activities and learning opportunities there. And that's been really powerful.
It's got to be super important because this doesn't come naturally to everybody,
it's probably
does it?
a program you could have used, Dave, when you
could
first
have
became
benefited
a
from it.
parent.
Now, I did a lot of character voices, so I faked my way through it, but it doesn't come naturally, and that's got to everybody, at least, and that's got to create some stresses sometimes for parents to be able to go, and I know this was something when we were especially young parents, and still when they're older, but like, are we doing enough? Are we doing it right?
Oh, right.
That's got to be quite a stressor for parents.
So what are some of the stresses that parents are facing today that come and take part in these programs?
One of the biggest ones is just general anxiety. And that stems from so many things. The fact that parenting is hard.
It is.
That's one of the most basic things.
And there's no manual, right?
And comparison is a brutal one because we're faced with all of these Instagram posts with all these shining stories of beautiful baking adventures and things like that. And it makes you feel inadequate.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of especially moms who we're seeing come in, they're not confident in their own ability to parent, and they're anxious about that. They're anxious that they're doing it wrong. They're anxious because the pandemic was really hard on people. And so they're coming out of this few years of feeling isolated and unsure of what to expect. And they're thrown into parenting. So what we try to do is provide them with confidence and tools and a community. And that community piece is so important because to know that you're not alone changes everything.
It's powerful to have somebody relate to you. Yeah.
It's really the whole philosophy of why KickBack is on TV today, is to remind people that they're not alone. That's
right.
It's not just, that's not just a platitude, is it? Like, that is a real thing. There probably would have been a time where I'm like, yeah, but what practically? Come on, I got it. But that is a real, honest to goodness thing, and it's got to be at least half of the solution, like just to be able to go, yeah, you're not alone.
And I know that community right now is the word commodity. It can kind of be, like, but it's a commodity right now, coming out of 2 years of not being around people as much and not connecting with your friends as much in support groups. So that's so wonderful that people can, young parents can find community at Kids Can Fly. I know that as a mom of a toddler, there is that whole no manual. You take your baby home, you have changing hormones, and then there's postpartum, and then you're doubting yourself. You know, I'm sure that there are lots of moms that you encounter that are navigating that.
Absolutely. And we have another program called the Parachute Program that specifically works to deal with preventing and addressing postpartum depression and other struggles. So that program really brings together time as a piece that really expands community, lets moms know that they're not alone, that there is support, that there is hope, and provides them with the tools right on site. And it's a no barrier program, so any mom can just come and attend.
That's amazing.
How do people know that they're dealing with postpartum depression? It might sound like a silly question, but especially when you're dealing with your first baby, there is a swell of emotion,
you're not
right?
Gonna sleep.
Yeah, in all kinds of different ways. But postpartum depression is a very real thing. How can you tell? How can you tell if this is a real thing at that
markers?
moment? Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we've noticed is that it's almost like the lights have gone dim in your outlook. So when you're trying to interact with your baby, you can't smile as big. You can't see the cheer in the room as easily. Everything's just a bit darker. And eventually, if you can notice that, you can say, hey, something's wrong. Maybe I'm not actually okay right now. That is really hard to do. So one of the ways that our Parachute program is no barrier is that you don't have to believe that you have postpartum depression. You just have to acknowledge that parenting is hard.
That's beautiful.
And that you need support. Because to add that level of diagnosis that's 10 steps to get that. That's doctor's appointments.
Right.
That might be psychotherapy.
And it's
That's
open,
a lot.
this program and the community is open to dads too. It's not just young moms, right? Which
especially
is
our
amazing.
Launchpad program. So the Parachute program specifically addresses motherhood.
Yes.
Whereas the Launchpad program is open to dads as well.
Awesome. Well, we are going to talk more about the Launchpad program. We're going to hop to break and we will be right back with Becca MacLellan.
Weekly in-depth coverage of the most local stories in Stratford, Perth, Brantford, Brant, Guelph, Wellington, and the Waterloo region. Hyperlocal stories that matter to you and your community. All this and more on Your Region This Week. All local, all year round. New episodes every Friday at 7 p.m. right here on Rogers TV.
Get a little messy while having a whole lot of fun. Mindful Makers explores the world around you and inspires you to think outside the box. Join Agnes and her friends as they share crafty projects and talk to local artists. Mindful Makers, Mondays at 6 p.m. on Rogers TV.
We can be hurt. We can be bruised. We can be broken. Slowed down, confused, and even numbed. But we can't be defeated. We're built on a foundation that's strong, our mission unwavering, and together we'll beat as one.
I don't care what the law is. I will never be a slave. That word, I hate it. It rests on my tongue like rot.
Peter, how does it feel to get paid for your work?
There are rumors freedom's coming for us all.
Freedom, you know that's all I want.
Chloe, careful. Real men would rather say you cross the river to America than let you go free.
Then I'll run.
I've run before. Maybe this time for good.
Just get her into the boat. No!
Chloe! Chloe, no!
Word of Chloe Cooley's resistance led to Canada's first legislation limiting slavery. After 200 years, slavery was abolished in Canada in 1834.
In studio and on the road invites you to find out what's happening in your own backyard. From tasty treats to interesting people and places, in studio and on the road. Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. on Rogers TV. Learn how to create your own masterpiece while in the comfort of your own home. On the Canvas with Lisa Braun is a step-by-step art lesson. On the Canvas, Mondays at 5:30 p.m. on Rogers TV.
And we're back talking with Becca MacLellan from Kids Can Fly. And while we were on the break, you two were having quite a moment talking about yoga and about the importance. And this is something you're saying that happens in Kids Can Fly. And
Amazing.
Rachel, that's a great degree of your world. But it's you're talking about stress levels and and how I don't know, positive mental health and low stress makes such a difference, not just during pregnancy, but afterwards as well.
And knowledge is really power, and I'm sure that's a big part of what you guys do is you educate and empower the individuals that come through Kids Can Fly in your different programs, but something as simple as learning the power of a single breath. Learning how to be vulnerable and have authentic conversation, which is something that again, it's sometimes weird and awkward after 2 years of a pandemic, being able to come back and connect authentically. So you mentioned that you do have yoga at, is it the Launchpad or?
We mostly will run it at the parachute program. And so we'll have guest instructors come in for various things like yoga, nutrition, all sorts of things.
Amazing.
So we love it.
That's amazing. So Becca, you have quite a history of working in organizations in the community, and you're a mom, and I know that you've had personal experiences where in the past you had to reach out for help, and I know that's not always an easy thing to do, because as parents we often think, we should just be able to like pull up our bootstraps. Is that the saying?
If it's not, it is now.
If it's not, it's now. Can you tell us more about that and how it's helped you be more invested in the work that you do?
Sure. So I have always found that parenting and doing community work is a funny mix. I call it toggling, where you can turn your Wi-Fi on and off on your phone. I have to toggle between community work and parenting because they don't always blend well. And I know that for a few years that I found that really difficult, where I would still stay kind of stuck in one mode or the other. And it's taken a long time to really build that skill. But overall, I find that knowing yourself and knowing some markers of if you're okay or not has been really, really helpful. Because as soon as you see yourself starting to not be okay, then you can set off those alarms in yourself and say, wait a minute, something needs to change.
And what was that for you?
For me, well, I had a pretty sudden mental health crisis where I had an explosion of post-traumatic stress disorder suddenly have a huge impact on my life.
Wow.
And for me, it was very obvious because I was afraid of squirrels all of a sudden. I had all these triggers that where I would feel really afraid in very mundane situations. And my concentration was so bad that all of a sudden I couldn't read my emails. I couldn't write anymore. Like I couldn't figure out how to get words on a page. And so it was clear something was not okay. And so that for me was my opportunity to start saying, okay, I guess I need to try to find help, which was scary because no one wants to acknowledge that something inside them is not functioning properly. But you just have to take those steps, especially when you have kids, because they need you.
And that was going to be my next question: is during this time, both during the time, but then as you've been able to find help and to be able to come out of it, what's the impact on the home? How do you? Because you're right, you still have things. Someone's got to make the noodles. Like there's still things you got to be able to do, and you want to be able to read. What's the impact on the home life and with kids?
Well, one thing that I had to do was teach my kids a little bit about post-traumatic stress disorder and say, Mommy is afraid of random things. So please maybe don't throw a ball at my head because instead of feeling this afraid, I will feel this afraid. And it doesn't feel very nice for me. So there were little things that I had to teach them because that was a huge part of being okay. But another part was just changing expectations. So I stopped trying to sell my clutter on Facebook Marketplace, and I stopped having such a high bar for my house being clean. Some things had to give, but food had to be on the table, groceries had to get bought, and so I got to work with my husband, and we made it work, just with different expectations than before.
I love that. And going back to like the Instagram parenting, the Instagram houses clean, and it's not realistic. And I think that's really healthy. And I know that I struggle with that, running a business, being a mom. I teach part-time with the school board. It's you sometimes have unrealistic expectations for yourself. And that's great to just hear you say it's okay to not have everything done.
And the world doesn't need to know either. Like for me, that was a pretty private process because I don't like to talk about things that I don't understand. And I didn't understand what was going on with myself. And so I just basically went off social media for a couple years where I would look at things, but I was not sharing because I didn't know what to say. And that had to be okay too. That was one of those things that had to temporarily change.
And maybe Kids Can Fly, the Launchpad, and the Parachute Program are places where young parents who are in a similar situation know they're not okay, but don't know exactly how to talk about it.
Exactly.
They can come and have a safe place to have those real conversations and get help in a really accessible, non-intimidating, welcoming. I'm sure I see your smile, and I'm sure people walk in and the staff at Kids Can Fly are just very welcoming.
We have some pretty fantastic
I
staff.
bet you do. I bet you do.
One of the things to me that I like about something like KickBack, like what we're doing and conversation that we're having, is that just knowing you personally, I've known you personally for quite some time, and so I knew University Becca, I knew Career Becca, I knew of some of the different things that you're going through, and I know you now, and while it was certainly a really hard time, and you're not alone in going through these hard times over the last little while, it's almost like coming out of it. And to me, the hopeful part of it is that you almost have another not feather in your cap, but you almost have another tool to be able to actually relate firsthand to people, because you still have the heart that you did before, you still have the passions that you did before, but it looks differently as you grow and you overcome and you learn. So it's almost like you're going to be able to have another tool to be able to encourage other people with.
Absolutely. Like I feel that this experience has changed me, but not in a negative way, in a really helpful way.
Yeah.
In a way that I can relate more, in a way that I have more compassion for people who have gone through similar things, because I get it now.
I love that. You have the theory, but you also have the practice. So that sounds like a really awesome
Nobody wants
balance.
to take advice from people that have never gone through anything.
That's true. And I mean, Dave, you said you had no idea what you were doing when you first started to parent, but I know your daughter.
Three pretty good kids now.
Yeah, they're like, they're okay.
We accidentally
yeah.
succeeded.
You accidentally succeeded. Without the Kids Can Fly
Without
program.
the Kids Can Fly program. But yeah. Well, Becca, thanks so much for being a part of KickBack today, and maybe tell people how they can find out more about Kids Can Fly if it's piqued their interest.
Yes. So our website is kidscanfly.ca, and information about all of our programs is there. And we're looking at relaunching a number of additional programs now that the pandemic situation has changed so much.
And how can people jump in? Is it a place where people can come and volunteer? Is it?
There are some volunteer roles, but we're especially excited to get people involved in Storybook Breakfast, which comes up on Saturday, February 4th.
Tell us more about
there's
that.
lots of opportunities to get involved there. So again, go to our website.
What's Storybook Breakfast?
Oh, Storybook Breakfast is a magical morning involving pancakes and breakfast meats and fruit.
Sold, I'm coming.
And storybook characters in costume in this excessively decorated venue, where it's really targeted for kids ages 6 to 8, where they can see all of these characters who they know and love, and get autographs signed and take pictures with them and just enjoy themselves.
Well, thanks so much, Becca, and thanks so much to you for joining us for this hour of KickBack.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Heartbeat of Mother Earth. I feel you and embrace your warmth. I see you dancing through the trees. Your song floats on the summer breeze.